It's a few days late, but we're still going to answer some questions from our listeners.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to one of our late night editions of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And you can catch us on wherever you listen to your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners out there, usually we bring you the 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. But as I said on our episode on Thursday, wasn't 100% sure if we were going to be able to get an episode out before I left to go out of town. Unfortunately, was not able to get one out on Friday, and that is our Mailbag Friday. So again, for those new listeners, you send in any question, whether it be through YouTube or through Twitter, I'll get to it in that specific episode. So all we're doing this week, which we usually aren't going to be doing, is pushing Mailbag Friday to Sunday. Gave a little bit more time for people to ask some questions, which was helpful considering the Royals traded for Mark Canha over the weekend and they made their final roster cuts. We'll be breaking that down all tomorrow as well. I'll also be posting our special AL Central preview where we got all of the AL Central hosts to give the thoughts on the season. Spoiler alert, mainly for the sake of debate and going back and forth, instead of me being biased and saying, oh, the Royals are going to win the division and they've got the best pitcher and the best player. I did make my pick that the Tigers were going to win the division, but I'll give you some reasons as to why. But surprisingly, everybody was still very high in the Royals compared to where everybody was at last year, even though I might have been in the minority last year picking the Royals to do better than people thought. Now they have that going for them in 2025. There are higher expectations, but again, you can find out right now for our Locked On Podcast AL Central preview. But yeah, as I said, pushing our Mailbag Friday to today gave a little bit more time for people to send in some questions. And as for our Sunday episode, it is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So get started today over at FanDuel. This is our last mailbag episode we're going to have before the start of the regular season. Very exciting times here in Kansas City for all the local teams for college basketball. They've already been eliminated if you're a KU Missouri or K-State or a Wichita State fan. So now the focus is strictly on baseball, I would assume. And that makes me excited because we do a baseball podcast here. We do a Royals podcast. So we'll be bringing in some listeners that may have not cared about the offseason until right now, where there's only a few days to go before the start of the regular season. Cole Reagans versus Tanner Bybee at Kauffman Stadium, which, by the way, on Friday it was mentioned, or reported, I should say, by the Royals that it's an official sellout they got for Thursday's game. So should be packed, should be rocking, should be great weather. Let us know if you're going to be heading out to Kauffman Stadium. I would love to hear where everybody's sitting. If you're going to tailgate, you're taking off work. We all know that opening day is one of the most exciting times of the year because we know you got baseball all the way until hopefully the end of October if you're able to make it that far. But after all that rambling here, let's get to some questions that I know a lot of people have been waiting to get my answers for since the beginning of the weekend. And now, even though it's late Sunday night, I apologize. It was a very long drive back. We got stuck in traffic, but we'll still be able to get to all those questions that you guys sent in, starting with Brad. His question is, hypothetically, let's say the Royals are competitors at the trade deadline. Could you see them taking a swing on a guy like Ryan McMahon? I know Michael Garcia plays third base, but he has proven that he is willing to move around. If I were to be honest with you, and the Royals are in it at the deadline, they could go for acquiring a third baseman like Ryan McMahon. And I am high on Ryan McMahon, but at the deadline, it almost wouldn't surprise me if they just tried to shore up the bullpen, or if there was a premier middle of the order bat they could get to lengthen the lineup a little bit. But the best case scenario we all know is somebody in that outfield like an MJ Melendez, a Hunter Renfroe, breaks out this year. Kyle Isbell can be, an average hitter, and then Jack Caglione could be that other piece for the outfield moving into the final stages of the season. That would be the best case scenario, and then you just try to strengthen the bullpen, which already looks good to begin the season. But, it's tough to make a true prediction on who they'd be targeting the deadline because we don't know where they're going to need help at all the way, back here on March 23rd, right? We get to June, we'll probably be able to identify a little bit better if a guy like Ryan McMahon would make a lot of sense. But I don't hate the name being brought up for the sake of this question. Next one that we are going to be turning to here, and if I miss any of these, please let me know, and I'll just try to answer them directly, whether it be on YouTube or it be on Twitter. This one comes from John. How much right field does Jack play in the minors, and how fast does he move up the ladder? It's a good question. I know a lot of people have been asking this. I would say that he's got to hit first. You've heard me say this before. He's going to have to hit better than a lot of people down in Double-A to start the year. He does that, then you can start playing him in right field about 20 to 25% of the time. And then if he continues to hit while learning the outfield position, then it needs to become almost his everyday position, because in Kansas City, though Vinny Pasquantino is dealing with that strained hamstring, he's probably going to be playing in the outfield. So he needs to be playing more than just 20 to 25% of the time. My prediction, though, as you'll find out in our AL Central preview, my hot take was you see him in June, and that's if everything goes well. So how fast can he move up the ladder? They are serious about him, and I imagine that he will move rather quickly through the minor league ranks. Though I will say this, they're not going to rush him. He is really going to need to force their hand and show that the minor leagues is just no place for him. He's going to be ready to go as early as 2025. Next one here is coming from, looks like Stormy. Hey, Jack, just want to take a moment and thank you for all the hard work you do for us on this channel. I appreciate the kind words. With that said, my question is a little bit more, excuse me. With that said, my question is a little more, I am curious to know your top 3 moments being a fan of the Royals. Fantastic question, and I love questions like this. Number 1, by far and away, would be the wild card game, being there in person. Number 2, I would probably say Carlos Beltran's walk-off home run on opening day, being there in attendance. That's another one I would throw up there. And again, I would love to hear other people's thoughts on your favorite Royals moment. There's so many to choose from, and I'm trying to spread around ones that I truly loved. And then, if I didn't have to be there in attendance, I mean, when they won the World Series in 2015, that's unforgettable. To me, that's the number 1 sports victory of my lifetime. And, I hope it can be topped by another World Series championship, but having that for the first time and witnessing that as a Royals fan, that just simply can't be topped. But still number 1, watching Salvador Perez walk off the Oakland Athletics in that wild card game 11 years ago now, coming up on a full 11 years. That's crazy to think about, but love that question. And let us know what your favorite moments are as a Royals fan as well. You can sound off in the YouTube comments. Looks like the next one here comes from Steve. How close are the catching prospects of Blake Mitchell and Carter Jensen to the Major League Club? Thanks. I appreciate having Total Royals news. I would guess that Carter Jensen is still a year away. Blake Mitchell, I'm going to go a year and a half, if not 2 years. The broken hand is going to set Blake Mitchell back a little bit. Good news is they're in no position to rush him right now. I mean, he was in Quad Cities last year, showed a lot of improvement. Carter Jensen showed a lot of improvement in Double-A. I would still say Jensen's about a year away. He's been in big league camp down in spring training back-to-back years. And as for Blake Mitchell, he's still got to show out in Double-A. So Mitchell, I'd say 2 years away. Carter Jensen's about a full year away until he's in the big leagues. Could always move quicker. That's just my estimated timeline at this point in time. Next one here is going to come from, actually, it might be done here on YouTube. So we'll transition real quickly to Twitter and get some of our final Twitter questions, or at least the final ones here at the bottom. We'll have about 20 or so more throughout the remaining parts of this episode. Enzo's question is, what's the best must-have food at Kauffman Stadium? I'm always a hot dog guy. I mean, there's been very few games where my choice of food was not a hot dog. The brisket nachos are great. It's just really expensive. Ballpark food in general is expensive. That's why I go with the hot dog, because it can be cheaper. So my go-to is always the hot dog. If I was going to pick something more specific, the barbecue is unbeatable there. It was such a great deal for the Royals to put barbecue out there. But I'm a hot dog guy. A hot dog and a beer is pretty much my go-to every time I'm out there at Kauffman Stadium, which I will be at here in a few days. Let's take our first break of this show. When we come back, still a lot of questions to get to next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. I know it's a little bit unique that we're bringing you an episode on a Sunday night, very late on a Sunday night, so I appreciate everybody waiting the entire weekend for me to get this episode out. Been traveling all day, so you can probably tell a little bit more worn out, but still we'll be having tons of content leading you up to opening day. We'll have 2 episodes tomorrow that I'll be posting, the AL Central preview with our other Locked On host, and then I'll be giving a full breakdown of Mark Canha coming to Kansas City, Vinny Pasquantino's hamstring injury. It's actually a good thing that we're not talking about Vinny tonight, because we didn't get the official word on if he's going to be hitting the injured list, if he's going to be good to go by opening day. That was the worst possible news you could have on the final game in surprise of somebody just needing to leave the game early. Although he did say in the locker room after the game that he feels fine, that his gut tells him he feels fine, but his gut's not the training staff. They'll definitely be more cautious on that front. Who knows, though? But we'll have that full breakdown tomorrow, as well as our thoughts on Mark Canha and Carlos Hernandez being picked up by Philadelphia. He didn't make the roster. Nick Prado didn't make the roster. Nelson Velasquez didn't make the roster. And only 2 of those guys. As I said, Carlos Hernandez gets picked up by Philly. Both Prado and Velasquez cleared waivers, so they'll be back in Omaha for the Royals to start the year. Let's jump back over to Twitter and get David's question. Verdugo signed for $1.5 million. Are the clubhouse concerns the reason why the Royals passed? I wouldn't say it was the clubhouse concerns. Probably the main takeaway I had with Alex Verdugo is, he just maybe at the end of the day wasn't what the Royals were looking for off their bench. There were just better fits out there. It was clear with Mark Canha, somebody that I thought they were going to sign before the Brewers gave him a minor league deal, and then they go out there and trade for him for a player to be named later or cash. But Mark Canha fits the bench role a little bit better than Alex Verdugo could. Alex Verdugo is not an on-base guy. He was a better defender than Mark Canha, but they looked at Mark Canha as a strong platoon hitting outfielder and can play corner outfield spots, has a great walk rate, hasn't posted an OBP south of 340 since 2018. Alex Verdugo was in need of a bounce back. I was actually surprised that he's going to go play in the minor leagues because I thought that he wasn't taking any deals because he was going to be playing off the bench or he was going to be at the minor league level. And it appears that the Braves told him, you're going to go to the minor league level and get built back up before you can join us. So I'm not sure that clubhouse concerns was why they didn't go for him. Maybe they felt that he didn't get on base at a high enough clip last year and they didn't feel confident enough that he could bounce back after a bad year in New York. So I'm going to say no. I don't believe that was the main reason why they did not pursue him. Brian asks, Joey Wiemer is starting to hit a little bit. Do you think he makes it? I do. Well, unfortunately, with us doing this episode on Sunday night, as we have a little bit more clarity on the Royals roster going into opening day. They'll actually be heading off to Arlington for a quick 2-game series against the Rangers exhibition series at Globe Life Park. So that's something they did last year, and we'll probably see a little bit more of Joey Wiemer. I think he's still with the roster last I checked. We know Mark Canha is going to be there. But they still have a couple more final moves to make. Joey Wiemer has been great. One of the Royals' best hitters to close out camp, which was phenomenal to see considering where he started. So it might just be coming down to Dairon Blanco or Joey Wiemer. But if he doesn't make the roster, I do believe that he'll be up sooner rather than later. I think that if he can show that he can hit really well in AAA and Dairon Blanco's not giving you much other than stealing bases, Joey Wiemer can have that chance to not just be a bench player for the Royals, but play every single day. And Annie Rogers' article, she said that it's expected that Mark Canha, Freddie Fermin, and outfielder Dairon Blanco will all break camp with the team, along with the everyday players. So right now it appears that Joey Wiemer is going to start the year in Omaha. So that does answer the question if he's going to make it. Probably not, because Dairon Blanco is going to get the first crack. But if you are excited to see him, I don't believe you have to wait that long to get a glimpse of him up in Kansas City. Ed asked, good or bad, which Royals provided some eye-opening moments during spring training? I mean, it was Jack Caglione and what he was able to do with the power. I even thought he was impressive defensively a little bit. If I was able to throw out some other names, I really did like what I saw from Michael Massey in camp. And if you can go all the way back, Michael Massey had some eye-opening moments in spring training, really hitting the ball hard, hitting to all fields. He's my breakout candidate for the Royals in 2025. And I thought he was great. Jonathan India had some eye-opening power. I know it's spring training. I know it's Arizona air. But still, it was nice to see a lot of that power at the top of the order. And you can, hopefully expect that to translate early on in the regular season when the weather's cold and you're facing good pitching. But Jonathan India had some good eye-opening moments. But Jack Caglione stole the show in that department. I mean, nobody truthfully came close to what he was able to do in camp in terms of captivating the crowd and captivating the audience. So I'm going to go with Jack Caglione there in a runaway. Keith's question is, will Joey Wiemer make the opening day roster as an outfield bench spot? And what are the realistic options for the outfield bench spot? Well, this question, of course, was before the Royals brought in Mark Canha. No, Wiemer's not going to make it, at least to start the year. Dairon Blanco, they like his ability to steal bases. And Mark Canha is a great platoon bat. We saw that in Detroit last year. He was also great for San Francisco. Not much pop left, but he walks a lot. He gets on base. That's the quote Moneyball there for you. But the expectation for these guys, and I can throw Cavan Biggio in there because I imagine Cavan Biggio makes the roster. But the expectation there is getting on base at a higher clip and playing average defense. That should be the expectations for the outfield bat. You're not asking them to be everyday players. Mark Canha needs to hit lefties well. Cavan Biggio needs to hit righties well. And Dairon Blanco needs to steal bases. For those three guys, they do that. The Royals are going to be just fine when it comes to depth coming off the bench. Bobbert Witt asked, will Bobby hit for the cycle this season? How many over his career? This is a good one because the Royals have been starved for somebody to hit for the cycle for a long, long time now. Of course, going back to the George Brett days, he will absolutely have one before his career's over. I'll throw it out there that I do believe he gets it this year. He's just got such an unbelievable tool set, if you will, of being a superstar baseball player. There's nothing he doesn't excel at. And when you have those 5-tool guys, they're going to be able to hit for the cycle. So I think he does it once this year over his career. Man, let's go 3 times, 3 or 4 times. Maybe it could be more. They're just rare. It's an oddity at times. It's not a perfect science, really. But I do believe he gets it this year, and I bet he does it a few more times over the course of his entire big league career. Caleb's question is, why do you think that Tyler Tolbert is still in camp? Do you think we see him in KC this year? And Harold Castro is putting up good numbers. How do you think he fits in KC's plans? Tyler Tolbert stayed in camp long enough because of his versatility, because of his speed on the bases. If Dairon Blanco went down with an injury, I would not be shocked to see Tolbert up in Kansas City at some point, because next to Blanco, he might be one of the fastest guys in the Royals organization. And if he's just taking on the role of being versatile and can steal bases, he's going to have a chance to play in Kansas City this year. As for Harold Castro, if Cavan Biggio bounces back and is doing fine for what the Royals are expecting of him, like living up to that standard of get on base, 320 clip, 325 clip, play 3 or 4 spots well defensively, you're not going to be DFA'd from this team. Harold Castro had a good camp. Harold Castro is a good story. And what's so strange about his overall numbers in his career, he's like a 270 hitter. yet he gets on base below 290 for his entire career. He's a bad defender. That's another part to this. He's just minor league depth. And if he does get a chance, I don't imagine it would be a long-term plan for him. But he might get up to Kansas City at some point this year. And maybe it's a week, maybe it's as the 27th man in the doubleheader. But he can have some value there being a versatile guy and somebody that's not going to walk at all, not going to strike out, put the ball in play. And if he gets hot enough, we saw in Detroit, he was able to put up a pretty successful season. So for right now, he's minor league depth and nothing more than that. Let's get to one more here before we hit break. Brian asks, the Vinny Pasquantino goes down. Who are you calling up? Second, who are your first two pitching call-ups? And as always, thanks for the awesome insight. Love the podcast. Appreciate the kind words as always. For Vinny Pasquantino, we know he's dealing with this hamstring strain. The first guy up, I would imagine, would have to be, it probably is not Prado because he's not on the 40-man roster. The first call-up maybe would be a Nick Lofton just to have an extra versatile guy out there. And then at first base, you're starting Mark Canha. Probably you could put Salvador Perez there and then play Freddie Fermin behind the plate. You could put Kevin Biggio at first base. He's got some experience there, played a little bit of it in spring training. If you're asking if it's Jack Caglione, I'm going to say no on that. I don't see Jack Caglione being on the opening day roster because Vinny's, not doing well with the hamstring. And I just get the sense that even if he does open up the season on the injured list, it's for, 10 days or 2 weeks at most, and then he'll be back in the lineup. So you're just trying to tread water at first base for 2 weeks. I'd imagine the guys they have on the roster right now are going to be able to do that. For the two pitching call-ups, I would say Steven Cruz has a really good chance to do so, especially since Carlos Hernandez is no longer in the organization. You got a hard thrower right there, and then I'll go Evan Sisk. Everybody appears to be very high on Evan Sisk rolling into 2025. Okay, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap it all up with our final set of questions on a unique edition of a Mailbag Sunday. So don't go anywhere. It's Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our final set of questions is going to begin with Eli. Is there anyone left in free agency that you would be interested in on a minor league deal? Now that they went out there and traded for Mark Canha, my answer is no. And I almost feel a sense of relief that after all of this time of saying, well, the Royals done, are they going to add a bat? Are they going to add a bat? I said, well, they're trying to go after Alex Duvall or Adam Duvall. I was good buddy Alex Duvall. A shout out to him. He does phenomenal work. But Adam Duvall is somebody that they were still going after. It was very clear, Starling Marte rumors, they were trying to add somebody. They get Mark Canha with a very cheap deal. There's nobody else out there now with how their roster is set to bring in there that could make a significant enough impact. I believe the Mark Canha move is perfect for what the Royals needed. Nobody else in free agency makes too much sense to bring in on a minor league deal. You got some guys that already are on minor league deals that are going to make the roster, like Kevin Biggio. Mark Canha technically was on a minor league deal before he was traded over to the Royals. Those are guys that have a chance to do some damage for this team. And with the bullpen being set, I'm going to say no. There's nobody else out there with 3 or 4 days to go that truly interests me to make the opening day roster coming out of free agency and not having any spring training time before the regular season. This one comes from Jerry. Are you worried at Reagan's last 2 outings? Gave up 8 earned runs in 7 1/3. Or is that Lynch's 2 bullpen outings have totaled 2 innings pitched with 6 earned runs? This close to the season opener, Reagan should be looking better in my opinion, and Lynch looked better before being moved to the bullpen. I can tell you this with 100% transparency, it doesn't concern me one bit. There is nothing I take away from Cole Reagan's outings. There's nothing I really take away from Daniel Lynch's outings, and I say that because I felt he was a lot going into camp. It was nice to see him pitch well, but he was not somebody I believed that was battling for a roster spot. He was battling for a rotation spot, but that's a different story here. With Cole Reagans, I'm not concerned in the slightest. It's what happens, and guys work on new pitches. Guys are working on different things throughout spring training. It doesn't mean much. It's not to say that he just won't struggle to open up the regular season. That could happen, but it wouldn't be due to bad spring training numbers. Seth Lugo didn't have great numbers. Michael Walker didn't have great numbers. At the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. So I would tell you this. I'm not concerned whatsoever about opening day and Cole Reagans taking the mound. My guess is that we'll see a very much polished up Cole Reagans for that first game of the season. Carson asks, who will be in left field on most days? My pick for this is Melendez as of right now. I really am curious who they are going to throw out there on opening day because that may change my answer, to be honest with you. Jonathan India is going to be playing out there. Michael Massey is going to be playing out there. Hunter Renfroe might have some time in left field. Kevin Biggio, Mark Canha could be playing some left field. That's another part to this. If Vinny Pasquantino's out for a little bit, how does that shake up the lineup? But right now, I would say to begin the year, MJ Melendez is going to get that shot at it. If Jonathan India is the opening day left fielder, then I may change my answer to Jonathan India. So maybe that's unfair to do to you. But right now, I think my gut would tell me MJ Melendez is the guy that they will roll with on opening day, and more often than not throughout the season. Brian's question is, so do you still think Biggio makes the cut? He hasn't hit much in spring. The interesting thing with Kevin Biggio, and I want to make sure I get the numbers up here, batting average-wise, no. I don't believe Kevin Biggio has hit at a very high clip. What's interesting about this is Kevin Biggio is putting together a slash line that won't be identical to what he does in the regular season. But, for example, he is hitting, or going into these games against the Rangers, he is hitting, I want to say he got in yesterday, unless I'm blanking on something here. I thought he got in yesterday, but he was hitting around 215, if I'm not mistaken, and his OBP is well north of 400. Like, there's a world in which Kevin Biggio hits a $195 but gets on base at a 330 clip, and you would take that. You would be fine with that for a bench bat. Because last year, Adam Frazier, Garrett Hampson didn't hit much, and they didn't get on base at a very high clip. Even if Kevin Biggio's hitting sub 200, he's below the Mendoza line, you still can trust him to get on base at a high clip. And this year, I got the numbers now in front of me after all that stalling. He hit 200 down there in Surprise. He got on base at a 467 clip. So I can take that. I can take that for what he's done in camp. You have a high walk rate. You play defense well. That's all I'm asking for out of the bench bat spot. So, yeah, I'm still very confident that Biggio does make the roster over Nick Lofton. Kurt asks, why do people think Bubic projects to be a successful starter outside of the changeup? What plus pitches there to get you through a lineup multiple times? Somehow giving him the fifth spot became a group take, and it's asking too much from him, in my opinion. I do love the debate of it. I don't think everybody needs to be on the same page when it comes to who the number 5 starter is. Here's where I'm at, though. I mean, I'm high on Chris Bubic. I won't hide that. He's got multiple pitches and a new one he's been working on in camp. He's got the slider. That was one of his best pitches last year. The fastball can set it up. He's got the changeup. He's got the cutter that he calls a bullet slider. Those can all play well as a starter. Even though it hasn't been the prettiest of spring trainings, who is the other option? Michael Lorenzen already grabbed a spot in the rotation. Alec Marsh didn't pitch in spring, so he's banged up. Kyle Wright, same exact thing. Didn't pitch in spring, was banged up. Noah Cameron still needs more seasoning. If the argument is Daniel Lynch, because I've heard this before of, well, why are we putting Chris Bubic in the rotation? He was never good in the rotation. He never stuck there. We've seen him be great out of the bullpen. Well, the same thing goes for Daniel Lynch. Daniel Lynch had never been consistent in the rotation, and he finally played well in the bullpen. He pitched well in the bullpen, and at least with Bubic to open up 2023, he was looking great out of the rotation. The stuff was playing well, and the Royals just simply want to see if that can happen again. If it does, it works out all the better. If it doesn't, then yes, you can make that pivot, but Bubic can pitch well out of the back end of the bullpen. It's why they went after Carlos Estevez, so that they could handle those situations in the back end of the bullpen. If they didn't have Carlos Estevez out there, then they would probably have Chris Bubic in the back end of the bullpen. But they got 3 guys that can close out games for them. Therefore, it allows them to move Bubic to the number 5 spot. If it doesn't work out, in my opinion, no harm, no foul. You can put Daniel Lynch and give him another shot there. Maybe Alec Marsh is healthy by that point, or maybe you're ready to roll with Noah Cameron. But that's where I'm at as to why they decided to go with Bubic as the number 5 starter. Okay, we'll go more rapid fire here to end out the show. Jason asks, I know spring training doesn't mean a whole lot for guys that are a lock to make the team, but is Sam Long a lock to make the team? I would imagine yes. In fact, I believe Andy Rogers put out the tweet where he did make the roster. Not the best of springs, and I would expect some regression from last year, but the Royals feel pretty confident that he should be just fine rolling into the regular season. Kanye's question, do you think Nelson Velasquez makes the opening day roster? Unfortunately, he did not, but he did clear waivers, so he's still in the Royals farm system. Danny asked, is there any chance Dairon Blanco will have a reduced role this year? I would say yes. He probably just sticks to being their designated pinch runner, since they have Mark Canha, who would spend more time as the platoon bat in the outfield, and Kevin Biggio out there can play a little bit more. If Joey Weimer starts playing well in AAA, you could always see him take Blanco's spot. So my guess right now would say yes, he would have a reduced role. Joshua's question is, do the Royals have anybody that can fill an outfield spot and or a pinch hitter in a late game situation? My guess would be Mark Canha would be that guy against lefties and against righties. Might be Kevin Biggio there because of his ability to draw walks. Charles is going to ask about Gavin Cross. Do you think Cross could be called up at some point this year? I do. I don't know what month it would be, but for bats down there, prospects, he's not where Jack Caglione is, but he's a top 3 hitting prospect in the organization. So my guess would be yes, we do see him at some point in 2025. The Mizler asks, I've been impressed with Harold Castro, so if Biggio goes down with an injury or his bat is unplayable, do you think Lofton or Castro gets the first call-up? Castro was impressive. As I said, a great story in camp. Nick Lofton would still be the guy to get the nod first. If Lofton doesn't work out, then, hey, maybe Harold Castro would get that chance to compete for a bench spot in Kansas City. Sarah's question is, should Tyler Tolbert have the opportunity to be on the opening day roster? He's made a very strong case this spring. He really did, and unfortunately, since I'm doing this on Sunday, I know what the roster looks like. He will have a chance in Kansas City. If I was to lock in an answer, he will make his debut this year for the Royals. You're exactly right. He did have a very strong camp, but they still feel confident with the bench guys they have right now. If Blanco shows that what last year stealing bases, it's just not the same thing this year, maybe Tolbert does get that opportunity to grab that spot from him. And lastly, Royals Data Dugouts question is, the AL seems wide open, especially with the Yankees' injury issues. In the spirit of the NCAA tournament, what are the chances the Royals can be the AL's number 1 seed? You're exactly right that it is wide open in the American League. I would put it still at about 10 to 15%. First things first, they got to win the division. And if they win the division, as much as I would love a 1 seed, I'll just take winning the division and having that first round bye. It gets a little bit hairier in the ALCS if you do face the 1 seed because you no longer have home field advantage. But still, the Yankees, with their injuries, they are the favorites. Baltimore is going to be able to make a strong push. And, hey, in the AL Central, Cleveland can win 90-plus games. Detroit can be scary. I mean, in my AL Central preview, I did pick Detroit. I didn't want to be the homer guy that's always picking the Royals for everything. So who knows? Maybe Detroit's the number 1 seed. But the focus should be getting back to the postseason and winning their own division so they can have that bye in the first round. All right, that's going to do it for our special Sunday edition of a Mailbag Sunday right here on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen tonight. And in spirit of opening day being just a few days away, go check out Fantasy Baseball's podcast with host Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with 2 episodes coming your way. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.